5 years later, she returned to China, wanting only to live a low-key life as a single mother. But on her very first day at work, she was cornered by the new boss. The man was as handsome as a god, his eyes cold and sharp, his thin lips parted slightly. "Camila, haven't we met somewhere before?" My heart skipped a beat, and I was about to deny it when a soft, cuddly little child suddenly hugged my leg and shouted at the man in a childish voice, "Don't bully my mommy. Even if you're handsome, you can't just hit on her." "Sweetie, shut up." The man's gaze suddenly fixed on the child's face. That face, almost a miniature replica of his own, made his eyes darken, and the pressure around him instantly plummeted to freezing point. He stared at me, his voice hoarse, with a certain air of certainty. "Is the child mine?" That's it. The disguise hadn't even been warm enough, and it seemed my biggest secret was about to be exposed. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of the icy, domineering CEO transforming into a doting husband. Countless days and nights that followed, he pleaded with me, his eyes red, "Camila, don't run away, I'll give you my life." 5 years have passed. Stepping onto this familiar land again, my feelings are complex and hard to describe. Back then, I fled in a sorry state, and now, with my little Cody, all I want is to live a peaceful life and give him a warm home. With a decent resume, I successfully landed a job at Fashion International, one of the top design companies in China. Unexpectedly, on my very first day, I encountered the most dramatic scene ever seen in a workplace drama. The big boss was parachuted in for an inspection. What's even more dramatic is that this big boss is Frank. The man who completely steered my life off course 5 years ago, the man I thought I would never see again in this life. He walked past surrounded by a crowd of admirers, and when his gaze swept over me, he paused for a fraction of a second before looking away indifferently, as if he were just looking at an ordinary employee. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed he didn't remember me. Of course, someone as high and mighty as him wouldn't remember that unexpected night 5 years ago, or an insignificant person like me. However, I ultimately underestimated the cruel tricks of fate. In the afternoon, I was summoned to the president's office to deliver some documents. Pushing open the heavy solid wood door, Frank stood before the huge floor-to-ceiling window, his back to me proud and aloof. "Frank, here are the documents you requested." I tried to keep my voice steady as I placed the documents on his large desk and turned to slip away. "Stop." A cold voice sounded from behind me, carrying an unquestionable command. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding uncontrollably. He turned around, his deep black eyes, sharp as a hawk's, locking onto me. "Raise your head." I took a deep breath, slowly raised my head, and met his probing gaze. Time seemed to stand still at that moment, and a silent pressure filled the air. "Have we met somewhere before?" He frowned slightly, as if trying to remember. My heart was in my throat, and I was racking my brains to come up with a reasonable excuse when the office door was suddenly pushed open a crack. A small head peeked in, its round, big eyes looking around curiously. "It's Cody. He had an early dismissal from kindergarten today, so I brought him to the office temporarily." "Oh no. Mommy." Cody saw me and immediately ran in on his short legs, hugged my leg, looked up at Frank with his fair little face, and shouted in his childish voice, "Don't bully my mommy. You can't just chat her up just because she's handsome." "Me, baby, you're such a great wingman." Frank's gaze, as if drawn by a powerful magnet, instantly fixed on Cody's face. That face was almost a scaled-down replica of his. The same eyebrows and eye contours, the same straight little nose, even that innate noble and aloof temperament was exactly the same. The atmosphere in the office instantly plummeted to freezing point. Frank's eyes suddenly turned incredibly deep. He walked towards me step by step, each step feeling like it was treading on my heart. He crouched down, his gaze almost level with Cody's, but his eyes were fixed on me. His voice was terribly hoarse, carrying an incredulity and a suppressed storm. "Is the child mine?" Oh no. The secret I had painstakingly tried to hide was exposed by this little guy and his biological father on my very first day back in the country. Seeing the complex emotions surging in Frank's eyes, I knew that my peaceful life might be coming to an end. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning, the prologue to a doting husband's transformation from an aloof, domineering CEO to a completely different person. Frank's gaze was so sharp, it felt like he could see right through me. I instinctively shielded Cody behind me, trying to appear calm. "Frank, you've mistaken me for someone else." "Admit your mistake?" He sneered, stood up, and looked down at me. The powerful pressure made it almost hard for me to breathe. "This face, you think I'd admit it?" He was referring, of course, to Cody's small face, which looked just like his. Cody seemed to sense the tense atmosphere. Her little hands gripped my clothes tightly, her big eyes glaring warily at Frank like a protective cub. "Frank, this is my child, it has nothing to do with you," I said through gritted teeth, making a final stand. "Really?" Frank's gaze lingered on my face, finally settling on Cody's hair. "Tomorrow, take him for a paternity test." "Impossible." I refused almost immediately. "Why should I keep my child?" "Either you take him there yourself," Frank interrupted me, his voice icy and devoid of emotion. "Or I'll confirm it my way." I dared not imagine what his way would be. With Frank's power in City A, obtaining Cody's DNA sample would be a piece of cake for him. Looking into the unwavering resolve in his eyes, my heart sank. I knew there was no escaping this. The next day, feeling utterly dejected, I took Cody to the private hospital Frank had chosen. Along the way, Cody seemed to sense my unease and, understandingly, didn't ask any questions, simply holding my hand tightly with his little one. The little guy was very brave during the blood draw, not making a sound, but his little brows furrowed tightly as he watched the needle pierce his fair arm. My heart ached terribly, and my resentment towards Frank deepened even further. The test results came back quickly, almost without any suspense. When the report, which stated probability of parentage greater than 99.99%, was handed to Frank, his aura seemed to freeze for a moment. He held the report, his fingertips turning slightly white, and looked at me and Cody with a complex expression. "Now, what do you have to say?" His voice remained cold and hard, but if you listened closely, there seemed to be a subtle, almost imperceptible fluctuation. I closed my eyes. It was too late to deny it now. "Yes, Cody is your child." "Why did you run away 5 years ago?" He took a step closer, his eyes sharp as knives. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you?" I thought I'd heard a joke, and couldn't help but curl my lips into a self-deprecating smile. "Tell you what?" "Tell you I was kidnapped by a stranger." "Or should I tell you I'm pregnant with your child, and then wait to be paid off by you or the Liu family?" 5 years ago, on that chaotic night, I was framed and, by a twist of fate, ended up having a relationship with him. When I woke up, I was filled with endless panic and shame, and all I wanted to do was escape. Later, when I discovered I was pregnant, I was even more shocked and terrified. I'm just an ordinary person, how could I dare to provoke a behemoth like the Liu family? Frank frowned, seemingly puzzled by my words, but more enraged by my running away with the baby. "So, you just took my son away without permission?" "He's my son too." I couldn't help but retort, "I've raised him all by myself for the past 5 years. "From today onwards, that won't happen again," Frank said firmly. "Children must return to their ancestral roots. You must also move in so I can take care of you." "I disagree." I immediately refused. "Cody is doing very well with me. Living in that pigeonhole-like place with you, eating fast food every day, is this what you call good?" Frank's tone was sarcastic. Clearly, he had thoroughly investigated my whereabouts over the past few days. "It's still better than living with a cold, indifferent stranger." "A stranger?" Frank narrowed his eyes, then suddenly bent down and picked Cody up in his arms. Cody was stunned for a moment, probably because it was the first time his dad had ever held him. His little body was a little stiff, but surprisingly he didn't struggle. He just stared at Frank with his big eyes full of curiosity. Frank looked at his miniature reflection in his arms, his eyes softening. Golden Bay, the most upscale neighborhood in City A, was Frank's private residence. His domineering and unquestionable nature made me feel powerless. I knew that with his methods, resistance was futile. For Cody's sake, I seemed to have no other choice. On our first day moving into the Golden Bay Villa, Cody and I were both a little reserved. The villa was as big as a maze, luxuriously decorated but cold and hard, just like its owner, lacking in human warmth. Frank gave me a spacious second bedroom, right next to his master bedroom. He said it was so he could easily take care of Cody. Cody adapted quickly. The little guy was full of curiosity about the new environment, running around and soon familiarizing himself with the layout of the villa. Frank seemed very busy, leaving early and returning late. But his attention to Cody never diminished. He would cancel his evening engagements and try to come home to have dinner with Cody. Although he still had that aloof demeanor and didn't talk much, he would awkwardly serve Cody food and put down his documents to listen attentively when Cody told him funny stories from kindergarten. Cody's attitude towards this suddenly appearing daddy gradually shifted from initial wariness to curiosity and probing. That evening, I was organizing my design drafts in my room when Cody came running in with his short legs, carrying a tablet computer. "Mommy, look." The little guy proudly handed me the tablet. I looked down and saw Frank's Wikipedia entry on the screen, covering everything from his business achievements to his scandals and gossip. "Cody, why are you looking at this?" I said, somewhat amused and exasperated. "Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated." Cody clenched his little fist and said seriously, "I'm studying Daddy to see if he's a qualified daddy." "Me, what is all this about?" "Mommy, the encyclopedia says Daddy is a cold-faced devil, and doesn't get close to women, but..." Cody tilted his little head, his big eyes blinking. "I think he seems a little afraid of you." "Afraid of me?" I chuckled. "How did you know?" "He seemed a little nervous when he talked to you," Cody tried to describe. "And last time Lucy let slip that Daddy secretly had a lot of little things redecorated in your room according to the style you used to like, and told you not to tell anyone." A slight tremor ran through me. Indeed, some of the small ornaments and paintings in the room were exactly my preferred style. I initially thought it was just a coincidence. "And another thing," Cody continued, "yesterday, Daddy was in a video conference, and I heard him telling those uncles, cancel all meetings after 7 p.m. from now on, I need to spend time with my son." He sounded really fierce. But after he hung up, when he saw me, he pretended nothing had happened. The little guy's vivid imitation of Frank's tone and expressions made me laugh. Looking at my son's innocent and carefree demeanor, something inside me seemed to soften a little. Perhaps this man wasn't as cold and hard as he appeared? Just then, there was a knock on the door. Cody immediately put away his tablet, ran to my side, and whispered, "It's definitely Daddy. Mommy, it's time to test him." I shook my head helplessly, walked over and opened the door. Sure enough, it was Frank. He was wearing loungewear, less sharp-toned than during the day, more relaxed at home, but still exuding an air of nobility. "Cody should go to sleep," he said succinctly, but his gaze lingered on my face for a moment. "Daddy." Cody suddenly spoke, his voice clear and bright, "Mommy worked so hard today, shouldn't you do something for her?" Frank was taken aback, seemingly not understanding his son's meaning. "For example, pour Mommy a glass of milk? Or give Mommy a shoulder massage?" Cody blinked his big eyes, his face saying, "I'm creating an opportunity for you." "Frank," my cheeks flushed a little, and I quickly said, "Cody, don't be silly, Mommy isn't tired." Frank's gaze swept over the faint dark circles under my eyes, then looked at the design drafts spread out on the table, his brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. He was silent for a few seconds, then turned away, leaving me with the words, "Wait for me." Not long after, he came back with a cup of warm milk and handed it to me, "Drink this and go to bed early." His movements were a little stiff, and his tone wasn't exactly gentle, but the warmth of the milk seemed to seep through the cup and soothe my fingertips, and quietly warm my heart as well. Cody, standing to the side, winked at me smugly and mouthed silently, "See? Paper tiger." Looking at Frank's slightly uneasy profile, I felt a strange and absurd feeling for the first time. This man, who appears to be all-powerful to outsiders, seems genuinely endearingly clumsy when facing me and Cody. Under Frank's forced request, my work was moved to a small office next to the president's secretary's office, ostensibly for convenient communication at any time, but in reality, it felt more like a form of surveillance. I had no choice but to accept it. Fashion International is currently competing for the Asia-Pacific flagship store design project of the top international luxury brand Phantom. This is of great importance to the company, and the entire design department has been working hard on preparations. However, after several rounds of proposals, the other party does not seem to be satisfied. With the deadline fast approaching, the design director was frantic, and the entire department was shrouded in a gloomy atmosphere. That day, the director, looking distressed, entered the president's office with several design drafts. Soon after, Frank's cold and displeased voice came from inside. "This is your final proposal?" Utterly unoriginal, completely missing the soul of Phantom. The director came out looking dejected, and the entire design department fell silent. I looked at the brand information and design requirements for Phantom on the computer screen. 5 years ago, when I was studying abroad, I had done in-depth research on this brand and had unique insights into its design philosophy and style. After much hesitation, I finally opened the design software. Instead of wasting time here, I decided to do something. I didn't use the company's internal system. Instead, I used my personal laptop and anonymously logged into a designer account named R. This was an alias I had created 5 years ago when I was abroad, out of interest and to take on freelance work. With a deep understanding of the Phantom brand and the experience accumulated over the past 5 years, inspiration flowed freely. I abandoned the overly conservative and commercialized proposals from the previous design department, boldly incorporating Eastern Zen aesthetics and modern minimalism, emphasizing the interaction between light and shadow, space, and the brand spirit. After 2 sleepless nights, a brand new design proposal was finally completed. I didn't sign it, I simply sent it anonymously to the project manager's email address under the name R. The next day, the design department was in an uproar. My God! This proposal submitted by R is absolutely stunning. Yes. It perfectly embodies the sophistication and artistry of Phantom, while incorporating a unique Eastern charm. Who exactly is this R? Do we have such a genius in our department? The director, holding the printed design draft, was so excited his hands were trembling. He immediately rushed into the president's office. This time, no criticism was heard from inside for a long time. After a while, Frank's special assistant, Logan, came out with a look of inquiry and surprise. His gaze swept over the design department staff. Frank asked, "Who is this designer who signed R? This proposal is excellent, and Phantom has already expressed its high approval." Everyone looked at each other, clueless as to who this R was. I kept my head down, pretending to work diligently, but my heart was pounding uncontrollably. Would Frank suspect something? After all, I'd only been there a short time. Investigate. Frank's concise and forceful command came from inside the office. Use all resources to find this R. Logan accepted the order and left. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily, I had registered this account using a fake identity, and the server was located overseas, so it shouldn't be so easy to trace. However, I still underestimated Frank's ability and determination. In the afternoon, Logan came to the design department again with a strange expression. "I found some clues." The last time the IP address logged in was within the company. It was late the night before last. Everyone's eyes turned to me. Because in the entire company, only I, as a connected person to the president, have the privilege of independently using the company network and equipment outside of work hours. I'm really in a mess. Camille, is that you? The director looked at me with surprise, as if he had discovered a new continent. Before I could deny it, Frank had already walked out of his office. He walked up to me step by step, his deep gaze fixed on me, with an all-knowing understanding. "You did it," he said, stating it as a fact, his tone certain. I opened my mouth, but ultimately acquiesced. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. No one had expected that this seemingly ordinary pretty face, someone who had gotten in through connections, was actually the brilliant and talented R. Frank's gaze held a complex, indescribable emotion for the first time: shock, scrutiny, and a barely perceptible hint of admiration. "Why didn't you just submit it?" he asked. I lowered my eyes. "I just wanted to help, I didn't think about." "From today onwards, you are officially in charge of the Phantom Project." Frank interrupted me, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Your talent shouldn't be buried." He paused, then added, "From now on, if you have any ideas, just tell me directly." Was this a form of recognition? As I watched him turn and walk away, a mix of emotions welled up inside me. The loss of one of my identities, while bringing unexpected career opportunities, also meant that I seemed to be becoming increasingly transparent to him. After I took over the Phantom Project, my work became extremely busy. I needed to lead the team to refine the plan, communicate with the client, and handle various unexpected situations. Frank seemed to have a different opinion of me now. Although he was still quiet and aloof, he gave me a lot of autonomy and support at work. Sometimes when I worked late, he would stay in the office, quietly processing his own documents, saying he was waiting for Cody to go to sleep. I knew that was just his excuse. My busy work schedule allowed me to temporarily forget the awkwardness between us and immerse myself fully in the project. My professional skills and leadership gradually gained recognition from the team. During this time, Nathan, a senior from my university days who had a good impression of me, happened to be one of the liaisons for the Phantom brand in China. After learning that I was in charge of this project, we had many more opportunities for work exchanges. Nathan is gentle and approachable, and has always been very considerate of me. After several meetings, he praised my proposal highly, and his eyes showed obvious appreciation for me. That afternoon, after the meeting, Nathan stopped me. "Camille, are you free tonight? I'd like to invite you to dinner, as a celebration of our successful collaboration." I was about to find an excuse to refuse when a cold voice suddenly interrupted. "She's not free tonight." Frank appeared at the conference room door at some point, looking at us expressionlessly. His gaze lingered on Nathan's eyes for a moment, then darkened instantly. "Frank," Nathan greeted us politely, clearly surprised. "Nathan," Frank walked over to me, his arms seemingly casually draped over the back of my chair in a protective gesture. "Designer Jane has to spend time with her children tonight, so she probably can't accept your invitation." His tone was calm, yet carried an undeniable possessiveness. I could sense the surprise and inquiry in Nathan's eyes. "So Camille already has a child?" Nathan smiled, concealing a hint of disappointment in his eyes. I was being presumptuous. Frank responded casually, then looked at me. "Pack your things, let's go home." Me, "There's still an hour until I get off work, okay?" But meeting Frank's eyes, which seemed to say leave immediately, I wisely chose to shut up and silently started packing my things. On the way back, the atmosphere in the car was a bit tense. Frank drove intently, his profile tense. "What's going on with Nathan?" he suddenly asked, his voice low. "What do you mean, what's going on?" I feigned ignorance. "He's my senior from university, now a business partner. He's interested in you." Frank's tone was certain, with a hint of barely perceptible sourness. "Frank, you're overthinking it," I said somewhat helplessly. "We just have a normal working relationship." "Does a normal working relationship require him to look at you like that?" Frank scoffed, gripping the steering wheel even tighter. "Stay away from him." "Frank, what right do you have to tell me what to do?" I was annoyed, his domineering attitude made me uncomfortable. "Because I'm Cody's father." He turned his head, his dark eyes fixed on me. "And also because," he paused, not finishing his sentence, but the possessiveness in his eyes became even more pronounced. The car quickly returned to Jinting Bay. At dinner, Frank was unusually attentive, constantly putting food on my plate, though his movements were still a bit clumsy. Cody looked at me, then at his dad, and sighed like a little adult. "Daddy, are you jealous?" Frank paused in his chopsticks, his ears seemingly turning slightly red. "Don't talk while eating," he said sternly, trying to maintain his authority. "Mommy, the book says that jealousy is a sign of liking someone." Cody winked at me with a grin. This little guy is getting better and better at watching the drama. I secretly glanced at Frank and saw him awkwardly looking away and taking a sip of his water. Seeing his awkward, pretentious act of caring so much yet trying to maintain aloofness, I suddenly felt a mix of amusement and unease. This man seemed to be clumsily protecting me and Cody in his own unique way. Domineering, yet somehow endearing? Over the weekend, the Liu family held a family banquet at their old residence. Ostensibly, it was to celebrate Perry's improved health, but in reality, it was also an occasion for Frank to formally introduce Cody to the Liu family. I usually avoid such occasions, but Frank, citing the need for Cody's father's family's approval, semi-forced me to go along. The Liu family's old mansion was solemn and dignified, exuding the weight and repression of a century-old prestigious family. Perry sat in the main seat, exuding an air of authority without being angry. Frank's stepmother Ruby and half-brother Paul were also present, their gazes towards Cody and me filled with undisguised scrutiny and hostility. Ruby, in particular, wore a fake smile on her well-maintained face, and her words implied that my identity was unclear and that Cody's background was illegitimate. "Frank, this child does look a lot like you when you were young, but this is no small matter, so it's best to be cautious," she said pointedly. Frank gave her a cold glance. "He's my son, I know what I'm doing, no need to worry about it." The atmosphere became quite awkward. Cody seemed to sense the unfriendly atmosphere as well, her little face tensed, and she clung tightly to my side. Just then, something unexpected happened. Perry suddenly turned pale, clutched her chest, and began to breathe rapidly, as if she were having a heart attack. "Dad!" Chaos erupted in the living room. Some ran to call the family doctor, while others frantically searched for medicine. "Quick! Nitroglycerin," someone shouted. Ruby hurriedly rummaged through his bag and pulled out a bottle, handing it to him. I glanced at it and immediately stopped him. "Wait. You can't use this." All eyes were on me, filled with doubt and confusion. "What are you, an outsider, yelling about here?" Ruby glared at me, annoyed. "Perry's condition isn't ordinary angina, it's more like an acute myocardial infarction." I quickly went to Perry's side, checking his pupils and pulse as I spoke in a low voice. In this situation, administering nitroglycerin rashly could cause a sharp drop in blood pressure, with potentially disastrous consequences. "Call an ambulance immediately. Until then, keep him lying flat, loosen his collar, and ensure his airway is clear." My tone was calm and professional, carrying an undeniable authority. Everyone was stunned, even Frank looked surprised. How do you know all this?" Ruby asked incredulously. "I'm a doctor," I answered succinctly, while methodically directing the maid, "Find out if there's any aspirin in the house, and have him chew one." Everyone was stunned. A doctor? This seemingly delicate designer was actually a doctor? Frank's gaze was fixed on me, his eyes churning with turmoil. He clearly hadn't expected me to be hiding such an identity. Under my direction, the chaos at the scene was brought under control. Soon, an ambulance arrived and rushed Perry to the hospital. Thanks to timely treatment, Perry was out of danger. In the hospital corridor, Frank looked at me with a complex expression. "You're a medical doctor?" He had clearly already had someone investigate my background. I nodded, without hiding anything. After going abroad 5 years ago, I studied design while pursuing a medical doctorate. These past 5 years haven't been easy for me. To support myself and Cody, and to avoid dwelling on the past, I've studied relentlessly and constantly improved myself. Design is my passion, while medicine is another path I chose, perhaps subconsciously also as a way to compensate for the helplessness I felt back then. Frank remained silent for a long time, so long that I thought he wouldn't say anything more. Then, he suddenly reached out and gently grasped my wrist. His palm was warm and trembling slightly. "Thank you, Camille." His voice was low and hoarse, filled with an unprecedented solemnity and lingering fear. If I hadn't stopped him in time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. At that moment, I clearly felt that the way he looked at me had completely changed. It was no longer just about exploration and possession, there was a deeper sense of awe, appreciation, and something called being moved. As for myself, after experiencing this thrilling rescue, seeing the undisguised concern and dependence in his eyes, my long-frozen heart seemed to quietly crack open. After Perry escaped danger, my position in the Liu family seemed to become delicate. At least, no one dared to openly give me a hard time anymore. Ruby and Paul, though still unwilling, had temporarily given up. Frank, on the other hand, started a completely new approach with me, a pursuit that was a mix of domineering, clumsy, and cautious. He began to appear in front of me in various ways. He used every standard tactic a domineering CEO uses to woo a girl: flowers, jewelry, limited edition bags. Although the methods were old-fashioned, even a little cheesy, I could feel his sincerity. He will remember that I don't eat cilantro, he will quietly help me solve small problems at work, and he will quietly stay by my side when I work overtime, even if it's just looking at documents. What made me both laugh and cry was that he actually started studying recipes and tried to cook himself. The result was that he almost set the kitchen at Jinting Bay on fire. Seeing him standing disheveled at the kitchen doorway shrouded in thick smoke, wearing an expensive shirt but a cartoon apron, I realized for the first time that this aloof man was actually quite down to earth. Cody was overjoyed and created opportunities for his dad every day. "Daddy, Mommy says her shoulders are sore, can you massage them for her?" "Daddy, these movie tickets are buy one get one free, why don't you take Mommy to see one?" "Daddy, the teacher said we have to draw my family, when are we going to take a family photo?" Faced with his son's unexpected help, Frank always kept a straight face, but his ears would secretly turn red, and he would silently do as he was told. Just as my relationship with Frank was gradually easing, and even some ambiguous feelings that I myself dared not admit were beginning to grow, the truth about that night 5 years ago also began to surface. Frank was not a heartless man. When Perry fell seriously ill, he was urgently recalled to the United States to handle family affairs. At the same time, Ruby and Paul were secretly sabotaging him in their struggle for the inheritance. 5 years ago, Frank was drugged and taken to that hotel room that night. And the person who plotted against me, besides my ever-jealous stepsister Chio, was also rumored to be Ruby. One of them wanted to ruin me, and the other wanted to find something on Frank. They hit it off and created that terrible accident. When Frank woke up, he found himself all alone. Given the intense internal strife within his family at the time, he assumed it was just another trap set by his rivals and didn't investigate further. When Frank uncovered all this and presented the evidence before me, his tall frame trembled slightly, his eyes filled with pain, regret, and overwhelming rage. "Camila, I'm sorry," he said hoarsely, carefully taking my hand. "It happened 5 years ago." He choked up, unable to continue. This man, who was always cold and strong in front of outsiders, now looked like a child who had done something wrong, his eyes reddening. "I didn't know it was you." "If I had known it was you," he took a deep breath, his eyes filled with unprecedented seriousness and determination, "I would never have let you suffer so much alone." Seeing his pained and self-reproachful expression, the resentment and grievances that had been building up in my heart for 5 years seemed to find an outlet at that moment, yet miraculously, they began to dissipate. It turned out that he was also a victim. It turned out that these past 5 years hadn't been just my suffering alone. It's all in the past. I gently pulled my hand away, my voice a little hoarse. "It's not over." Frank suddenly grabbed my hand, his grip tight, as if afraid I would disappear again. "Camila, give me a chance to make it up to you and Cody, okay?" His eyes were burning and obsessive, filled with the terror of losing her. At that moment, I knew that Frank's tumultuous pursuit of his wife had officially begun. And my long-dormant heart seemed to melt away in a corner amidst this belated truth and fervent confession. Since the truth was revealed 5 years ago, Frank's compensation for me has been upgraded to the level of a doting husband. His pampering is all-encompassing, boundless, and inhumanly extravagant. I wanted to eat at that private kitchen in the south of the city that supposedly has a 3-hour wait. He invited the chef to his house to cook just for me. I casually complimented the work of a certain niche designer. The next day, that designer's entire collection was displayed in my walk-in closet. I took Cody to the amusement park. He turned down a contract worth hundreds of millions and accompanied me personally, carrying my backpack and buying me water without complaint. He was even made to wear a ridiculous cartoon headband by Cody, which attracted the attention of passers-by, but he was happy to do it. At the company, no one dared to point fingers at me anymore. Frank directly declared that I was his one and only future wife, and under the guise of protecting the future boss's wife, he assigned me 2 highly skilled female bodyguards. As for those who had looked down on me and tried to trip me up, Frank dealt with them swiftly and decisively, showing no mercy. Several longtime employees who had been sarcastic and unfriendly towards me in the design department were transferred to less important departments by him on some pretext. Ruby, who had once tried to mock me, was confronted by Frank after Perry regained consciousness. Frank presented Perry with evidence of Ruby and Paul's years of secretly transferring company assets. Perry was furious and immediately revoked all of Ruby and Paul's rights in the company, kicking them out of the Liu family mansion. The most satisfying thing was dealing with the Jian family. My so-called father quickly remarried after my mother's death and showed no concern for me. My stepmother and stepsister Chiu bullied me since I was a child. Chiu was one of the masterminds behind the scheme against me 5 years ago. After Frank discovered the truth, he didn't hesitate and immediately took swift and decisive action to target the Jian Group's stock and withdraw from the cooperative project. In just a few days, he plunged the already shaky Jian Group into a bankruptcy crisis. My father and stepmother brought Chiu to Jinting Bay and knelt at the door begging me to let them go. Looking at their ugly faces, I felt no pity whatsoever. Frank, holding Cody, stood in front of me, his eyes cold as he looked at them. "You deserve the consequences of how you treated Camila back then. Get out." Chiu was still not satisfied and pointed at me, screaming, "Camille! You bitch! You think you're so great just because you've hooked up with Frank? You're nothing but a..." Before she could finish speaking, Frank's eyes flashed, and the bodyguards behind him immediately stepped forward and unceremoniously invited them away. "Don't let this trash dirty your eyes." Frank turned around and gently tidied my windblown hair, his tone full of utmost affection. Cody, standing beside me, waved his little fist. "Mommy, don't be afraid. Daddy will protect us. Whoever bullies Mommy, Cody will have Daddy beat them to a pulp." Looking at the 2 men in front of me, one big and one small, one exuding domineering aura and the other cute and fierce, both protectively surrounding me, my heart was filled with a feeling called happiness. So this is what it feels like to be loved and protected without reservation. Warmth, peace of mind, it felt like I had the whole world. Frank's affection wasn't just about material satisfaction and standing up for me. It was more about the gentleness and respect that permeated every little detail of our daily lives. He would listen attentively to my ideas, support my career, and even when I neglected him because I was too engrossed in my work, he would just look at me with a slightly aggrieved expression and then quietly make me a cup of coffee. He is no longer the aloof and icy CEO, but has gradually transformed into a clingy, jealous, yet incredibly affectionate and loyal dog. Just as my relationship with Frank was growing stronger and our family of 3 was becoming increasingly sweet, a new crisis quietly emerged. Although Paul was expelled from the Liu family, he was not resigned to defeat. He secretly joined forces with several Liu family collateral branches who were dissatisfied with Frank, as well as some foreign hacker groups, in an attempt to steal the core secrets of the Liu group through cyberattacks and deliver a fatal blow to Frank. For a time, Liu's group's network security system was frequently attacked. Although Frank's technical team did their best to defend, the other party was obviously prepared and the attack became more and more intense, even nearly breaking through the core firewall several times. Frank was extremely busy dealing with this, staying at the company for several days in a row to handle the crisis. Seeing the fatigue in his eyes and his furrowed brow, I felt a pang of sympathy. Late that night, after I had put Cody to sleep, I quietly went to the study. Frank was still in a video conference with the technical team, his face serious. The other party's attack methods are very strange, as if a top hacker is manipulating things behind the scenes. Our firewall is about to break down. The technical director's voice was filled with anxiety in the video. Frank rubbed his temples, about to say something, when I stepped forward and gently pressed his shoulder. "Let me try," I said softly. Frank looked at me in surprise. Camila, the technical team on the other end of the video call was also stunned. I didn't explain much, but sat down at the spare computer and started typing rapidly. Lines of complex code flashed across the screen like flowing water. My eyes were focused and sharp, a stark contrast to my usual gentle designer and meticulous doctor persona. I learned hacking skills on my own while I was abroad, to protect my and Cody's information security, and also to occasionally take on some side jobs to earn money for baby formula. I never expected that they would come in handy today. My codename is Phantom, and I'm fairly well known in that secretive underground world. The conference room was silent. Everyone watched me intently as I operated the controls. Frank stood behind me, staring at the code stream on the screen that he didn't quite understand but was clearly exceptionally advanced, his eyes brimming with shock and disbelief. His Camila, besides being a genius designer and a medical doctor, is also a hidden hacking genius? How many more surprises does she have that he doesn't know about? The opponent's attack was indeed fierce, even resorting to some unconventional methods. However, thanks to my superior technology and deep understanding of network architecture, I quickly found their weakness. I not only successfully intercepted all the attacks and fixed the firewall vulnerabilities, but also followed the trail to trace the other party's server address and even intercepted email evidence of Paul's collusion with those hackers. When I pressed the last enter key and the message, "Task completed," popped up on the screen, the entire video conference room erupted in cheers. My God! It's solved! It's all solved! Amazing! This Camila is simply a god. Phantom! Could she be the legendary Phantom? Someone knowledgeable exclaimed. Frank turned off the video, walked up to me, knelt down, and held my hands tightly in his. His dark eyes were filled with a turbulent mix of emotions, shock, ecstasy, pride, and an even deeper love. "Camila," he croaked, too excited to finish his sentence. I looked at the undisguised adoration and infatuation in his eyes and couldn't help but smile, a hint of mischief in my eyes. "Frank, now you know how powerful I am, right? You're not allowed to bully me anymore, okay?" Frank chuckled, then pulled me into a tight embrace, as if he wanted to meld me into his very bones. "I wouldn't dare," he whispered in my ear, his voice tinged with lingering fear and relief. "My darling is so amazing, I can only cherish you like a precious gem. From now on, I'll entrust the cybersecurity of the Lu Group to you, okay?" He nuzzled my cheek, his tone slightly coquettish, to be my backer. I chuckled and nodded gently. At this moment, all my personas have fallen away. Designer Camille, medical doctor Camille, hacker genius Camille, these are all me, yet none of them are the complete me. The complete me is Camille, Cody's mother, and the lover this man before me wants to protect for the rest of his life. With the crucial evidence I had intercepted, Frank's counterattack was swift and decisive. He directly submitted evidence to the relevant authorities showing that Paul had colluded with external forces, attempted to steal trade secrets, and endangered national economic security. Paul will face the full force of the law. Those members of the Lu family's collateral branches and overseas hacker groups involved also received their due punishment. The Lu Group's crisis was completely resolved, and Frank's prestige within the company reached its peak. This experience has strengthened the bond between Frank and me. We are no longer just parents, but also partners fighting side by side and each other's strongest support. The way he looked at me was always filled with an overwhelming love and pride. He said I was his treasure, the most dazzling light in his life. And I, too, finally let go of my past reservations and defenses, and began to learn to reciprocate his passionate feelings. We'll walk hand in hand like any other couple, watch movies, and occasionally bicker over little things, but we'll make up quickly. Cody is the sweetest glue between us. The little guy sees Daddy and Mommy getting more and more affectionate, and he's always beaming, saying, "Daddy, you better hurry up and marry Mommy." Frank dotes on Cody to the core. He never refuses his son's every wish. He patiently plays childish games with Cody, tells him bedtime stories, and personally picks Cody up from and drops him off at school, attracting the attention of kindergarten teachers and other children. The once aloof and abstinent CEO has now completely transformed into a super dad and a wife-flaunting maniac. His social media, which used to be filled with the same business posts every year, is now flooded with photos of me and Cody. The entire upper class of City A was stunned. Who could have imagined that the iceberg who once made countless socialites hesitate would one day melt into tenderness, and so completely at that? Of course, the happiest person was Perry. Seeing her son find the woman he loved and have such a smart and adorable grandson, Perry recovered quickly and was cheerful all day long. She even started urging Frank to hurry up and hold the wedding. Days passed in this warm and sweet atmosphere. The gloom of 5 years ago completely dissipated, and Frank and I both found healing and redemption. We learned to trust, to cherish, and most importantly, to love. It was my birthday. Frank said he had a surprise for me and mysteriously took me to the revolving restaurant on the top floor of the newly built landmark building in City A, the Starry Sky Tower. He booked the entire restaurant and decorated it like a dreamlike wonderland. There were dazzling crystal chandeliers, fragrant roses, melodious violin music, and Cody clouds that seemed within reach outside the window. Cody, dressed in a smart little suit, ran over like a little gentleman and took my hand. "Mommy, happy birthday. You look so beautiful today." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, smiling and patting his head. Frank, dressed in an elegant white suit, walked slowly towards me, holding a large bouquet of vibrant red roses. His eyes were gentle and tender, as if filled with the starlight of the entire night sky. "Camila, happy birthday." He handed me the flowers, his voice deep and magnetic. "Thank you." My cheeks flushed slightly. Dinner was exquisite and romantic. Frank thoughtfully cut my steak and poured me red wine, every detail exuded meticulous care and affection. Halfway through the meal, the restaurant lights suddenly dimmed. The melodious violin music stopped, and in its place played a gentle and tender piano piece, my favorite, Starry Night. I looked at Frank in surprise. He smiled gently at me, then stood up, straightened his bow tie, walked over to me, and knelt on one knee. My heart skipped a beat. He took out an exquisite velvet box from his pocket, opened it, and inside lay a dazzling diamond ring. The cut and design of the diamond perfectly matched my taste. It was clear that careful thought had been put into it. "Camila," Frank looked up at me, his dark eyes filled with seriousness, affection, and a hint of barely perceptible tension. "5 years ago, I missed you, and you and Cody suffered so much. This is the biggest regret of my life. For the past 5 years, I've lived like a walking corpse until your reappearance brought color back to my world. You entered my life with light, warmth, and our baby, and illuminated my path. You are smart, independent, strong, and kind. Every aspect of you fascinates me. Meeting you is the greatest luck of my life. I once thought that my life might just be like this, living a cold and indifferent life, until I met you and Cody." His voice trembled slightly, and his eyes were a little red. "I don't dare ask you to forgive my past negligence and folly immediately, but I beg you, give me a chance to make amends and love you for the rest of my life. Camille, will you marry me?" His voice was incredibly sincere, every word striking a chord deep within my heart. The air around us seemed to freeze. Looking at the undisguised love and anticipation in his eyes, and then at Cody's bright, expectant eyes beside me, I couldn't help but feel my own eyes well up with tears. For the past 5 years, I have weathered all the storms alone. I never imagined that one day, someone would be willing to shelter me from the wind and rain, hold me in their palm, and promise me a lifetime together. I thought my heart had long since become indifferent, but under his burning and affectionate gaze, my dormant heart was finally completely revived and began to beat violently for him. I choked back tears, nodded, and held out my hand. "I do." The 3 words fell softly, yet weighed a ton. Frank breathed a sigh of relief, his eyes practically overflowing with joy. He carefully slipped the diamond ring onto my ring finger, then stood up and pulled me into a tight embrace. "Thank you, Camila, thank you," he murmured, his voice trembling. Cody clapped and cheered excitedly, "Yay! Daddy's proposal is a success. Mommy's going to marry Daddy." The restaurant was filled with enthusiastic applause and blessings. I nestled in Frank's warm and firm embrace, listening to his strong heartbeat, feeling the cool touch and burning promise of the ring on my ring finger, my heart filled with an unprecedented happiness and peace. After all the searching and wandering, I've finally found my happiness here. Frank and I had a wedding dubbed the wedding of the century. It was held on the most romantic island in City A, and Frank practically booked the entire island. The venue was decorated with countless flowers and crystals, transforming it into a fairy tale world. The guests were all incredibly wealthy and influential, and the event was broadcast live globally, a truly grand affair. I know that he is using this method to declare to the world his love and importance for me, and to make up for the grievances I have suffered. At the wedding, I wore a custom-made wedding dress by a top international designer, and walked slowly down the aisle arm in arm with Frank. Cody, wearing a little dress in the same color scheme as me, served as our flower girl, walking ahead with her short legs, and she charmed everyone. When Frank put the wedding ring on my finger and said "I love you" with deep affection, the sunlight shone on us, as if we were bathed in a golden halo. At that moment, I felt like the happiest bride in the world. Our married life was incredibly sweet, like living in a honey pot. Frank truly lived up to his reputation as a doting husband. He entrusted most of the Lou Group's affairs to his trusted deputy, while spending more time with Cody and me. He would come home on time every day for dinner, snuggle up with me on the sofa to watch mindless idle dramas, clumsily learn to blow-dry my hair, and get jealous for half a day if I glanced at another man, then assert his dominance with an even more passionate kiss. He spoiled me so much that I became a helpless little good-for-nothing. I didn't have to worry about anything at home, all I had to do was be beautiful and be loved by him. With his support, my design studio grew bigger and bigger, and I continued to pursue my career, but he always found ways to interfere with me. For example, when I'm engrossed in drawing design drafts, he'll hug me from behind, rest his chin on my neck, and say in a wrong tone, "Camila, look at me, I'm prettier than the design drafts." For example, when I'm in a video conference, he'll deliberately walk by in a bathrobe, and even accidentally drop his towel, causing a gasp on the other end of the line, followed by an innocent look at me. I find it both funny and exasperating, but also quite amusing. Under our loving care, Cody has become increasingly lively, cheerful, and clever. The little guy has extremely high emotional intelligence and always manages to act as a peacemaker when Frank and I have disagreements. "Mommy, Daddy knows he was wrong, please forgive him. Look how pitiful he is." The little guy hugged Frank's leg, blinking his innocent big eyes and pleading. And Frank would always cooperate perfectly, putting on an expression that said, "I was wrong, please forgive me, wife." Every time I see these 2 adorable kids, one big and one small, putting on an act in front of me, my heart melts. Life is filled with the warmth and happiness of everyday life amidst their bickering and sweet moments.